Now for the news in detail. The global death toll from the novel coronavirus has crossed 42,000, with more than 850,000 total infections. 178,000 people, though, have recovered. In the U.S., a record 865 people have died in the last 24 hours, bringing the total fatalities there to over 4,000. In Germany, that country has reported almost 150 new deaths and nearly 5,500 additional cases in a day. More in this report.
The COVID-19 pandemic continues to rip apart global infrastructures and has rendered national governments helpless. Over 42,000 people have died around the globe due to the pandemic, with more than 850,000 total infections. The UN chief has warned the pandemic is the world's worst crisis since World War II, as the number of dead in US is now higher than in China. The White House has projected 100,000 to 240,000 deaths in the US from the pandemic, even if current social distancing guidelines are maintained. US President Donald Trump says over 2 million people could have died if distancing measures were not put in place.
We're going to lose 220,000 people, and it's going to happen over the next few weeks. And with that, I did start off by saying today, long before this question, I said, this is going to be a rough 2 or 3 weeks. This is going to be one of the roughest 2 or 3 weeks we've ever had in our country. We're going to lose thousands of people.
Amid fast-spreading pandemic, countries have scrambled to establish makeshift hospitals and placed national lockdown to contain the spread, while Oman, Slovakia, Republic of Congo recorded their first COVID-19 deaths, while Japan remains on the brink of a state of emergency.
Now is a very important time to avoid a rapid increase in infections. We remain on the brink, but we are not at a point to declare an emergency situation. That has not changed.
While the pandemic also rattles global economies, governments and monetary institutions have announced trillions of dollars to mitigate the economic fallout.
82 patients of coronavirus in Pakistan have recovered so far as the country is battling with the pandemic. The health ministry said 178 new confirmed cases were reported in the last 24 hours, bringing the total to over 2,000. All 4 provinces of the country have imposed conditional lockdowns to battle the virus. The health ministry said 46% of the infected people came back from Iran, 27% from other countries, and another 27% transmitted locally. The ministry reported 26 deaths so far across the country. It said 708 infections were recorded in Punjab, 676 in Sindh, 253 in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, 158 in Balochistan, and 54 in the capital, Islamabad. Amnesty International, meanwhile, has asked the Indian government to not abuse its powers in occupied Kashmir. The valley is reeling under New Delhi's curfew and communications blackout that has been in place for the last 241 days. In a tweet, the rights body said New Delhi must refrain from using power during the global health crisis of COVID-19. It said the pandemic in the region cannot be defeated without solidarity of its people. Kashmiri miners in the occupied territories have joined calls to end the cruel curfew. A 5th-grade Kashmiri student has asked Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to end the internet blockade in the valley. The student said she has not attended her school since August 5th due to the clampdown imposed by the Modi government. In India, the countrywide crisis of basic necessities and health facilities has deepened amid the 21-day lockdown. On March 24th, Prime Minister Modi announced a sudden curfew against the coronavirus pandemic, leading to nationwide panic. Pre-lockdown stocks have started to finish as trucks with food essentials have been blocked due to interstate border shutdowns. There is also a dearth of laborers for loading and unloading trucks, as most workers have gone to their homes. Doctors and nurses across India are getting restive in the absence of basic medical protective gear. Medics say the government is providing them raincoats and cloth masks, which are completely insufficient. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says the U.S. has missed a historic opportunity to lift sanctions on Tehran during this coronavirus outbreak. In a cabinet meeting, Rouhani said the sanctions have failed to hamper Iran's efforts to fight against the pandemic. Rouhani said it was a great opportunity for Americans to apologize and to lift unjust sanctions on Iran. He said the COVID-19 crisis is a huge test for Iran, which the country has passed successfully. The president hailed doctors, paramedical staff, and security forces for their role in the fight against the virus. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had raised the possibility of easing sanctions on Iran to help fight the coronavirus. Speaking to media, Pompeo said the Trump administration evaluates its policies on a constant basis. He said U.S. sanctions do not apply to medical and other humanitarian goods. In Afghanistan, 8 people have been killed after a vehicle was struck with a roadside bomb in southern Helmand province. Police said 2 others were wounded in the blast in Nehr Saraj district of the province. They said those dead belong to the same family. No group has yet claimed responsibility. The UN Security Council has called for a comprehensive ceasefire in Afghanistan in light of the coronavirus pandemic. In a statement, the 15-member council urged Afghanistan's politicians to put aside their differences amid the fatal crisis. The council stressed the importance of sustained efforts to reduce violence in the country. The UN Security Council reaffirmed its strong commitment to sovereignty, independence, and national unity in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the UN's Deputy Special Representative for Afghanistan, Ingrid Hayden, has also welcomed Kabul's negotiation team. Hayden said despite the political impasse, the Afghan establishment has agreed on a diverse negotiating team. She said UNAMA urges all Afghan parties to work together to resolve their differences for the betterment of Afghans. Hayden said it is not the time for divisions, but for statesmanship, accommodation, and inclusivity. Well, a 3-member Taliban team has arrived in Kabul to monitor the government's release of imprisoned militants. The development comes as part of a peace deal signed between the Taliban and the United States in late February. In a tweet, Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said their technical team will assist the prisoner release process. He said the Taliban team expected practical work on a deal with the U.S.-backed government to start in the next few days. Abdullah, President Ghani's political rival, has said the formation of an inclusive negotiation team is an important step towards intra-Afghan talks. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo termed recent developments good news. As per the peace deal, the Taliban demanded the release of 5,000 detained fighters as a confidence-building measure. Syria says it has thwarted an Israeli air attack over the eastern Homs province and shot down its missiles. State media said the missiles were fired by the Israeli Air Force from Lebanese airspace. There were no immediate reports of damage or casualties. Officials said the target was a military airport where Iranian forces were present. Since the start of the Syrian conflict in 2011, Israel has carried out hundreds of attacks in Syria, targeting government troops. Israel has not claimed responsibility for this attack. U.S. President Donald Trump and his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan have underlined the need for ceasefires in Syria and Libya amid the global pandemic. In a telephone call, the 2 leaders spoke on efforts to defeat the coronavirus and bolster the global economy. Both presidents agreed that it is pivotal for Syria and Libya to adhere to ceasefires and work towards a resolution. Earlier, a UN official called for the lifting of sanctions against Syria that could undermine its capacity to contain the coronavirus. A ceasefire in the Syrian province of Idlib has been in place since the 6th of March after a deal was struck between President Putin and his Turkish counterpart. Saudi Arabia has urged Muslims to wait until there is more clarity about the coronavirus pandemic before making plans to attend the annual Hajj pilgrimage. The kingdom has already suspended the Umrah pilgrimage until further notice. The largest annual gathering of Muslims is scheduled to begin in late July. Saudi Arabia has halted all international flights indefinitely. Last week, it also blocked entry and exit to several cities, including Mecca and Medina. The country has reported 10 deaths and over 1,500 coronavirus cases. In Iran, meanwhile, state television has reported gas exports to Turkey have been halted after an attack on a pipeline near that country's northeastern Bazargan border. An official of the national Iranian gas company has said Kurdistan Workers' Party militants may be behind the attack. The Iranian official said Turkish border guards, who are usually present on site, have left because of the coronavirus. He added that it usually takes 3 or 4 days to resume gas exports after such a blast. Turkish state media have also confirmed the blast. The area has now been secured by Turkish armed forces. Turkish media said an investigation is being launched to find out the cause of the explosion. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Let's begin this segment of the bulletin in Chad. That country says it has deployed its soldiers to Niger and Nigeria in a counter-offensive against the Boko Haram militant group. Defense Minister Mohammed Abali Salah said the Operation Boma's Wrath was launched after the militant group killed 98 Chadian soldiers last week. Salah said as part of the operation, 5 companies of soldiers have been deployed to Niger and Nigeria with the approval of those countries. He said the purpose is to clear the area around Lake Chad from terror. On March 23rd, Boko Haram fighters attacked a military base in Boma in Lac Province. The Chadian government declared Lac Province a war zone on Friday. Boko Haram launched a bloody insurgency in 2009 in northeastern Nigeria, but later spread its atrocities to neighboring Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen has urged EU members to only take limited emergency measures in the fight against the coronavirus. The statement comes after Hungary's nationalist leader Viktor Orban took on sweeping powers. In a statement, the top official said the Commission will closely monitor member states regarding steps taken regarding COVID-19. Commission spokesman Eric Mamer said that joint work is needed to overcome this crisis. He said emergency measures could not be taken at the expense of the European fundamental principles. Mamer said respect of freedom of expression and legal certainty are pivotal in these uncertain times.
It is of utmost importance that emergency measures are not at the expense of our fundamental principles and values as set out in the treaties. Democracy cannot work without free and independent media. Respect of freedom of expression and legal certainty are essential in these uncertain times.
Well, earlier, Hungary's parliament granted nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban the right to rule by decree in order to fight the coronavirus. On to Venezuela now, which has rejected the U.S. call to establish a transitional government to hold fresh elections. The Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza said the U.S. is trying to interfere in his country's internal affairs. Arriaza said Venezuela is an independent and democratic country, and it will not accept interference from a foreign government. Venezuela's opposition leader, Juan Guaido, has supported the U.S. offer to step aside in order to form an interim government. Guaido said the government should agree with the proposal as it ends crushing U.S. sanctions.
Today, it's clear in the U.S. and our proposal that advancing to a national emergency government can lift the sanctions. That shouldn't be an excuse for the dictatorship. It shouldn't be an excuse to not advance and attend to our people. Our people deserve this moment. A moment for all Venezuelans, a moment to continue advancing, and it just won't be the United States. There will be many countries that go along with this emergency national government proposal to form a state council where responsibilities will be delegated to finally have truly free elections.
Hundreds of Brazilians held a socially distanced protest in Rio de Janeiro against President Jair Bolsonaro's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Angry citizens banged on pots and pans from their houses while calling for Bolsonaro's resignation. Far-right populist Bolsonaro has been at odds with his cabinet and state governors over strict quarantine measures. Brazil's health minister Luiz Henrique Mandetta has opposed Bolsonaro over social distancing measures to curb the virus. Meanwhile, Brazil's economy minister Paulo Guedes says the government needs to strike a balance between isolation policies and protecting the economy. These comments underline the divisions at the top as Bolsonaro argued hunger is just as big a threat as coronavirus itself.
Like the Director General of the World Health Organization said, every individual is important. At the same time, we should stop the destruction of jobs. The collateral damage of the measures to fight the coronavirus cannot be worse than the very illness. My obligation as president goes beyond the next few months.
Well, recent polls show a decline in Bolsonaro's popularity due to his handling of the outbreak, which he has repeatedly called a little flu. Lockdowns to contain the coronavirus have left the world's most economically vulnerable citizens without a source of income. In Brazil, sanitation workers are struggling to make ends meet after the virus made its way to the country's shores. More on that now in this report.
Until recently, this plant has produced 8,000 tons of recyclable material, generating employment for some of Rio de Janeiro's poorest citizens. But the quarantine measures have forced the plant to shut down operations. The sudden change has left most employees unable to feed their families.
Our cooperative receives trash weekly. This week, the staff has nothing left, no money to buy their food and maintain their expenses. Have fun with the collection live today.
One sanitation worker says her fridge has been empty since Brazil started implementing quarantine measures.
It is very difficult right now. When I was working, at the end of the week, I was doing okay. My refrigerator was not full, but it was also not lacking. But now, it is like this.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has repeatedly called for the reopening of the country's economy, saying a recession would be more harmful than the coronavirus. But experts say lifting quarantine measures too early could create a need for an even stricter lockdown.
UK's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle have formally begun their new lives today after stepping down as senior members of the royal family. The couple has relinquished their Royal Highness titles and will no longer use the Sussex royal label. The couple will also no longer carry out duties on behalf of Queen Elizabeth II and have given up their office within the monarchy in Britain. However, they will continue to be known as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Harry remains sixth in line to the throne with no change in the line of succession. The couple has already relocated to California after announcing their intention to quit royal life in January. The US-based hospitality group Marriott has reported a second major data breach to hit the hotel chain in less than 2 years. Marriott said it has informed over 5 million guests worldwide who may have been affected by the breach. The company said the leaked information included names, addresses, and phone numbers of customers. Marriott said credit card information, passport numbers, or driving license information was not accessed in the breach. In November 2018, Marriott announced a massive data breach where hackers accessed the information of over 380 million guests. European markets are trading lower as global market sentiment continues to take a pummeling amid the coronavirus outbreak. London's FTSE 100 has slumped over 4% lower as the banking sector stocks plunged between 3 and 7% after suspending dividend payments. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading about 4% lower, while Frankfurt's DAX has plunged about 3.5%. In Asia, the Nikkei 225 led losses, closing over 4.5% lower. Seoul's Kospi lost about 4%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng traded over 2% lower. The Shanghai Composite also lost ground. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil prices slashed over 5%. The IATA has said global airlines will not start to recover from their worst ever crisis until the last quarter of this year. The industry's trade group warned that any rebound will be short-lived if there is a new wave of COVID-19 infections in the winter. The International Air Transport Association said many carriers, even those with strong finances, are struggling to survive. It said the industry burns $61 billion in cash this quarter because of a 70% drop in traffic and revenue. Airlines are set to post a collective net loss of $39 billion this quarter. The majority of their aircraft are grounded due to lockdowns and travel restrictions. The Director General of IATA, Alexandre de Juniac, said these are numbers beyond anything they have had in the industry. The German automaker Volkswagen says it expects vehicle sales in China to quadruple in March, pointing to a recovery following the coronavirus pandemic. The head of Volkswagen China, Stefan Wallenstein, said they are optimistic that the crisis will be over in 2 to 3 months. Wallenstein said he hopes vehicle sales of up to 1 million in March from 250,000 in February. The carmaker said it is prepared to ramp up capacity at its plants in the country, 22 of which have resumed production. 2 Volkswagen plants in Changsha and Urumqi are still closed. Volkswagen said it plans to sell 1.5 million electric cars in China per year from 2025. Well, for the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.News. Thanks for watching this bulletin.